On a night of hard rain, a wounded German shepherd steps into a police station with a child's backpack clamped in his jaws. He can't speak, he doesn't need to. His eyes say hurry. What follows is a sprint through storm and timber, where loyalty becomes a compass and instinct slices through fear. The dog's nose finds scraps, bare footprints, a bitter citrus scent. His body shields a child's fragile breath. Each step drags the officers closer to the truth and to a choice between vengeance and rescue. The ending stays hidden, but the heart does not. What secret is this shepherd carrying? The storm came fast that night. By 3 a.m, the skies over Cedar Hollow were black and heavy, the kind of dark that felt endless. Rain fell in sheets, hammering rooftops and bouncing off the empty streets. Thunder rolled like a drumbeat, slow and threatening, each clap shaking the windows of the small police station that sat at the edge of Main Street. Inside the station felt hollow. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on walls lined with faded wanted posters and a corkboard full of notes no one looked at anymore. The storm outside made the building feel even quieter, like the world had shrunk to the sound of water beating against glass. At the front desk sat Deputy Mike Harrelson. He was in his 50s, wide-shouldered, thick hands resting on a stack of paperwork he had already read twice. His uniform was stretched at the waist, and the half-empty mug of black coffee near his elbow was his lifeline. He had the look of a man who had seen too much in his life to be impressed by rain, thunder, or sleepless nights. A Vietnam veteran before he was ever a cop, he carried his age like a heavy coat, solid rough, but still standing. He rubbed at his eyes and glanced at the clock. Nearly 4. The night shift always stretched too long. He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath his weight, and thought again about how many years he had been doing this. Too many. Across the room sat Officer Tessa Boyd. She was 27, slim, her brown hair braided tight down her back. She looked focused, eyes locked on the open case file in front of her, a pen tapping against the edge of the paper. Her uniform looked new, the creases still sharp, boots polished. She was still the outsider here, 2 weeks into her assignment, and already the subject of whispers around town. City girl, too young, probably soft. The words followed her everywhere, at the gas station, the diner, the grocery store. Cedar Hollow was small, and it remembered everything. But what the town didn't know was that Tessa had left Seattle because of a case that never left her mind. A child had gone missing. She had done everything by the book, every step, every regulation. And still, the boy was lost. She had replayed it every night since what she could have done, what she should have seen. Rules had failed her once. Now she trusted her instincts more than the manual. The storm shook the front doors. The wood rattled in its frame wind, howling down the street. Tessa looked up from her file. "You think this roof will hold?" she asked, voice soft, almost joking. Harrelson grunted. "It's held this long. Don't see it giving up tonight." She nodded, but her eyes drifted back to the glass doors. For a moment she thought she saw movement outside, a shape in the rain, low and heavy. But the next flash of lightning showed only the empty street water rushing in rivers toward the gutter. She rubbed at her temple and leaned back, her pen falling silent. The silence broke with a bang. The station doors slammed open, as if ripped by the storm itself. Wind howled through the lobby, spraying water across the floor. Harrelson jumped to his feet, coffee spilling. Tessa was already standing, hand reaching for her flashlight, though she didn't know why. Out of the dark came a shape. A German shepherd staggered through the doorway, soaked to the bone mud clinging to his fur. He was big, his frame filling the entrance, though exhaustion bent him low. One ear was torn, scarred from some old wound. His right paw left a faint smear of red on the floor with every step. In his jaws clenched tight as if it were life itself, he carried a child's backpack. He moved slowly into the center of the room, chest heaving, water dripping from his coat onto the tile. He stopped, dropped the backpack with a heavy thud, and lifted his head toward them. His eyes burned, not wild, not lost, but sharp, urgent, demanding. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The storm screamed through the doorway. "What in God's name?" Harrelson muttered, taking a step forward. The dog's body tensed instantly. A low growl rose from his chest, deep and steady. His ears pinned back, his legs stiffened, and his eyes never left them. "Easy," Tessa whispered, stepping between Harrelson and the dog. She lifted her hands slightly, palms open. "Just wait." "You're not serious," Harrelson said, voice low, gravelly. "That thing's half dead and angry. Could be rabid." "No," Tessa said quickly. "Look at him." The dog didn't flinch, didn't back down. His tail was stiff, his gaze fixed. He wasn't begging. He wasn't lost. He was showing them something. Tessa knelt slowly, her knees touching the cold tile, her eyes level with his. "It's okay," she said, voice calm, even. "You came here for a reason, didn't you?" The dog's gaze flicked from her to the backpack, then to the door, then back again. A signal. Tessa reached for the backpack. The nylon was soaked, streaked with mud. She turned it over, wiped away grime with her thumb, and froze. A name tag hung from the zipper. Eli Morgan, Grade 4, Cedar Hollow Elementary. Her breath caught in her throat. The boy had been missing for 24 hours. The entire town had searched the woods, the fields, every road out of town. Helicopters had circled for hours, and still nothing. Until now. She looked up at Harrelson, eyes wide. His mouth opened, then closed, words caught somewhere in the gravel of his voice. "Well," he whispered finally, "I'll be damned." Tessa stood, the backpack clutched tight in her hand. Her voice was sharp, clear, louder than the storm. "Wake the sheriff. Prep a team. We're going after him." Harrelson frowned. "You're telling me you want to follow a dog? This isn't just a dog," she snapped, then softened, her tone steady again. "Look at him. He came here for us. He knows where the boy is." The German shepherd turned toward the door again. His body trembled, his paw bleeding with every step, but he didn't pause. He limped forward, then stopped, looking back once more. His eyes said what no words could: "Follow me." Tessa felt something stir deep inside her. The same fire she had thought was gone. The instinct that had been buried under guilt and doubt. It flared back to life with a single look. She grabbed her jacket, pulling it tight around her shoulders. Rain lashed against the windows, thunder cracked above. But all she heard was the steady beat of her own heart. "I'm going with him," she said. And in that moment, as the storm raged and the German shepherd waited at the door, the night in Cedar Hollow changed forever. The backpack lay heavy in her hands. It was soaked through the mud, packed into the zippers and straps, the nylon scratched from being dragged across rough ground. Tessa held it close, water dripping onto her boots, her fingers brushing over the name tag again and again, as if the letters might vanish if she looked away. Eli Morgan, 10 years old, missing for a day. The search had stopped just before midnight. Too dark, too dangerous to push deeper into the woods. Everyone promised they would start again at first light. Parents, neighbors, deputies, volunteers, over 100 people had combed the forest floor. They had found nothing. No jacket, no shoes, no tracks that made sense. And yet here it was. Proof that Eli had been somewhere. Proof that someone or something had carried his last trace into this very room. The German shepherd stood 10 feet away, still dripping rainwater, still watching. His chest rose and fell with sharp breaths, his injured paw pressed tight against the ground, as if he refused to show weakness. He made no sound now, only that steady stare, golden eyes locked on her. Tessa felt her throat tighten. She crouched again, holding the backpack where the dog could see it. "You brought this," she whispered. "You wanted us to know." The dog's ears flicked forward, then back. His gaze shifted from her face to the door and back again. His body swayed once as though ready to leave, but he waited. Behind her, Harrelson muttered, "This is madness." She turned her head slightly. The older man stood with arms folded, jaw tight. His voice was low but sharp, the kind of tone that cut through the storm. "You really think we should follow him? A stray shows up half dead, and you want to build a rescue mission on that Jesus Boyd. We've got protocols. We've got procedures. You remember those?" Tessa rose slowly, the backpack still in her grip. She faced him, the rain hammering against the doors behind them. "Protocols didn't bring Eli back," she said, her voice flat. "This dog did." The words hit hard even for her. Her mind went back to Seattle. She hadn't wanted it to, but it always did. The girl's name was Ava, 8 years old, last seen walking home from the park. Tessa had been 2 years on the force, eager, determined to prove herself. She had followed every rule, every order. They had searched block by block, hour by hour, and still the girl had disappeared. Later, when her body was found by the river, Tessa had stood there, with rain soaking her uniform and bile burning her throat. She had felt the weight of every mistake, though the truth was, no mistake had been made. They had done everything right, and it had not been enough. That was the night she stopped trusting the book. The book had limits. Instinct didn't. Now, looking at the dog in front of her, she felt the same pull in her chest. Instinct. The raw certainty that he knew more than anyone else could. She crouched again, softer this time. The dog's breath came in slow huffs. She reached her hand halfway out, then stopped, letting him choose. He sniffed the areas, twitching, then shifted closer. His nose touched the wet nylon of the backpack, then flicked toward the door. A plea, a command. Tessa whispered, "He's telling us where Eli is." Harrelson swore under his breath. "Or leading us to God knows what. Wolves, a dead deer, a trap. We don't know what this is." She looked at him, her face calm but firm. "I'm not letting this go. Not tonight." He shook his head. "You're 2 weeks into this job, and you're about to stake your career on a mutt." "On a chance," she corrected. They stood there in silence for a moment. The storm roared through the gap in the doors, wind spraying rain onto the floor, but neither moved. Finally, Harrelson sighed, the weight of decades pressing down on his shoulders. He rubbed his forehead, muttering something about rookies and gut feelings and God help us all. "Fine," he said, at last. "But if you're going, you're not going alone." Relief flickered across her chest, but she didn't smile. She only nodded. The dog, still nameless to her, turned again toward the door. His paw left another faint streak of red on the tile, but his stride was steady. He looked back once more, and then he stepped into the storm. Tessa grabbed her jacket and the flashlight from the desk. She slipped the backpack over her shoulder, feeling its weight settle against her spine. She didn't know if Eli was alive. She didn't know if the dog would lead them to him or to a memory as broken as Seattle. But she knew one thing she had to follow. Harrelson called in a quick message to the sheriff's line, his voice gruff and resigned. "We've got something. Boyd's following a lead. I'm going with her." He hung up before questions could follow. Together they stepped into the night. The rain hit like needles, cold and relentless. The street glistened with water, reflecting the glow of the street lamps that still burned dim against the storm. The dog moved ahead, his head low, shoulders hunched, but his path was sure. He crossed the street without hesitation, turned toward the tree line at the far edge of town, and kept going. Tessa tightened her jacket around her boots, splashing through puddles. The backpack thumped against her back. She glanced once at Harrelson, who walked beside her with his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets, his face set in a grim frown. "You know," he said, his voice almost lost in the rain, "this could ruin you." She shook her head. "Or save him." He didn't answer. They reached the edge of the forest. The pines stood tall and dark, their branches swaying dripping rain like tears. Beyond them, the world was nothing but shadow. The dog stopped at the tree line, turned his head, and looked at her. Tessa lifted her flashlight, but the beam barely cut through the mist. Her pulse quickened, her breath loud in her ears. This was the moment: step forward or turn back. Seattle came to her. Again the river, the rain, the hollow face of failure. She felt it pressing on her heavy as stone. But then she looked at the dog, soaked, scarred, bleeding, and still standing, still leading. She whispered almost to herself, "I'm with you." And she stepped into the trees. The forest closed around them like a curtain. The storm followed, but quieter now, muffled by pine and cedar. Every step was softer, the ground, a carpet of wet needles. The beam of her flashlight wavered against trunks and branches, but always the dog was there, a shape moving ahead, pausing, waiting, then leading again. The night stretched long as they moved deeper. No radio signal reached here, no lights from the town, only the storm, the forest, and the sound of boots and paws pressing into the earth. Tessa's mind raced. She thought of Eli's face from the missing poster. Dark hair, freckles, a smile too big for the picture, as if he had been told to grin. She thought of his mother's voice on the news, cracking with every plea. And she thought of Seattle, of Ava, and how she had promised herself never again. The dog stopped suddenly. He sniffed the air, ears pricked. His body went rigid, tail straight. Tessa froze the flashlight beam, trembling in her grip. "What is it?" she whispered. The dog turned eyes, catching the light for just a second, then moved forward again, slower now, more careful. Tessa followed. Harrelson muttered something under his breath, but kept pace. Minutes blurred into an hour. They found nothing at first, no footprints, no clothes, no sign. Doubt began to creep into Tessa's mind. Maybe Harrelson was right. Maybe she had let her guilt drive her into the woods on a ghost's trail. But then she saw it. A scrap of fabric, bright blue against the dark earth. Torn, frayed, clinging to the branch of a low cedar. She stepped forward, lifted it with shaking fingers. It was thin nylon, the kind used in children's jackets. Her breath caught. Eli had been here. She turned to Harrelson, the proof in her hand. His face shifted, still skeptical, but softer now. The dog barked once, sharp and certain, then trotted ahead. Tessa closed her fist around the fabric. Her voice was firm, steady, carrying through the storm. "He's out there," she said, "and we're going to find him." And with that, they followed the dog deeper into the dark. The forest waited like a dark mouth at the edge of town. The trees swayed in the wind, their tall spines creaking, branches dripping water that sparkled in the weak beam of Tessa's flashlight. Beyond that first line of pines, the world seemed to vanish. The dog moved first. He limped through the wet needles, nose close to the ground, body tense but determined. Tessa followed the backpack on her shoulder, heavy, her boots squelching in the mud. Behind her came Harrelson, grumbling with each step, the old man's patience stretched thin by rain, cold in the idea of chasing shadows. They weren't alone for long. Deputy Raoul Mercer joined them just past the ranger's trailhead. He was tall, wiry, with a 3-day stubble shadowing his jaw. His dark eyes carried the kind of tired weight you only got from years on the job. A raincoat hung from his shoulders, dripping at the hem, and he chewed a sunflower seed as he stepped into the beam of Tessa's light. "Sheriff said you'd need backup." "Raoul," said voice calm, steady. He spit the seed shell into the mud without looking. "Didn't say it would be for a dog." Harrelson snorted. "Welcome to the circus." Tessa straightened. "He's leading us." "Eli's backpack," I heard Raoul cut in, nodding at the dog. So this is the hero. He studied the animal head tilted. Hell of a shepherd. What's his name, don't know yet, Tessa admitted. But he came straight to the station. He's got a purpose. Raoul gave a low whistle. Dogs don't usually show up with evidence in their teeth. Guess we'll see where this goes. He wasn't mocking. His tone was half respectful, half wary. Like a man who had seen strange things before and knew better than to laugh too soon. The dog paused ahead, glancing back once ears pricked, then moved on. His pace was steady, his head low. Lead the way, Soldier Raoul muttered, falling into step. The forest swallowed them. The storm outside dulled to a muffled hum under the canopy. Raindrops slid down needles and fell in steady ticks onto the earth. Each step sank into soft ground pine needles, cushioning boots' branches, scratching at coats. The smell of damp soil and resin filled the air, sharp, clean, endless. Tessa kept her light low, careful not to blind the dog. He didn't need it. He trotted ahead with focus, stopping sometimes to sniff at a trunk, circling a patch of ground, then pushing forward. His limp was still there, a faint hitch in his stride. But it didn't slow him. Harrelson muttered under his breath every few minutes. Complaints about wet boots, aching knees, the madness of chasing a stray through the woods. Raoul didn't speak much, just cracked more sunflower seeds, spitting shells with sharp accuracy. The rhythm of it became part of the forest's sounds. The drip of rain, the crunch of needles, the low growl of distant thunder. Tessa's chest was tight. Every few steps, she looked down at the scrap of blue nylon she had tucked into her pocket. Proof that Eli had passed this way. Proof that the dog wasn't lost. Still doubt whispered. What if the boy was already gone? What if they were chasing nothing more than fragments, cloth footprints washed away by rain? She shook it off. She had chosen to believe. She had to. Raoul broke the silence first. You know I left Boise because of something like this. Tessa glanced at him. His eyes were on the ground, scanning as they walked. Traffic stop gone wrong, he continued. Partner didn't make it. After that, I didn't trust the rules anymore. Paperwork doesn't save lives. Instinct does. He flicked another shell away. Looks like you're the same kind of crazy. Tessa didn't answer at first. She thought of Seattle, of Ava, of the weight she carried every night since. She thought of the riverbank, the failure. Finally, she said quietly, Instinct is all I've got left. Raoul looked at her, a long, steady look. Then he nodded once, like he understood. Harrelson barked out a laugh behind them, dry as gravel. Instinct, procedure, fate, call it what you want. Right now we're freezing our asses off because a wet mutt walked into my lobby. The dog growled softly up ahead, almost as if answering. See, Raoul smirked. Even he disagrees with you. The trail narrowed. Roots twisted across the ground like dark veins. The trees leaned closer, their trunks slick with rain, their bark shining when the flashlight beam touched them. Mist curled low to the ground, weaving between bushes and stones. The forest had its own silence. Not the quiet of peace, but of waiting. No bird song, no insect hum, only the sound of their boots and the dog's steady breaths. Tessa felt it in her skin. The place was alive, watching. The dog stopped suddenly. His ears shot forward, his body stiffened, tail straight. Tessa froze, heart pounding. She raised her light, sweeping it across the undergrowth. Shadows danced. Branches swayed. Nothing moved but rain. Then the dog bent low, sniffing hard at the base of a fallen log. He pawed at the earth, scratched once, then lifted his head and looked back at them. Tessa hurried forward, kneeling beside him. She parted the ferns and saw it a faint smear of mud, darkened with something else. Blood. Small but real. Her throat tightened. Eli, she whispered. Raoul crouched beside her, examining the ground. Could be from him. or from the dog's paw earlier. He glanced at the shepherd, but his reaction says otherwise. Tessa touched the earth with gloved fingers. The smear was fresh enough to still shine under the light. He was here. He kept moving. The dog whined low and urgent and nudged her arm with his nose. Then he turned, climbing the slope beyond the log, leading again. Harrelson muttered another curse, but his voice had softened. He wasn't mocking anymore. He was worried. They climbed. The slope was slick water running down in small rivulets, turning soil to clay. Tessa's boots slipped more than once, and Raoul reached out to steady her, his grip quick but firm. The dog moved faster, agile, even with his limp, his body tense with drive. At the top, the forest opened slightly. The storm light above bled through a pale silver glow that made every trunk look taller, every shadow deeper. Tessa's flashlight caught something tangled on a branch. She reached up, pulled it down. A shoelace. Torn, frayed, soaked. Her chest tightened again. Raoul studied it in her hand. His voice was grim. Kids falling apart. Tessa nodded, words caught in her throat. She tucked the shoelace into her pocket next to the scrap of jacket. Proof. The dog barked once, sharp and sure, then pressed on. Hours seemed to fold into minutes. They followed the shepherd deeper, deeper still. The forest changed as they went. The trees grew thicker, the air colder, the ground softer, almost sponge-like with moss. Every sound seemed louder, the snap of a branch, the splash of water underfoot, the heavy breaths of men and dog. Fatigue crept in. Harrelson's steps grew slower, his mutters fewer. Raoul's jaw clenched tighter as he chewed seeds. Tessa's shoulders ached under the weight of the backpack, but she refused to let go. The dog never slowed. It was strange, she thought. He wasn't just searching. He was reading the forest, as if every scent, every trace told him a story. He moved with purpose, not wandering, always certain, even when the path twisted, even when the rain hid tracks. It was instinct. Pure, undeniable instinct. And for the first time since Seattle, Tessa let herself believe that instinct might be enough. They paused at a clearing just wide enough for the rain to pour straight down on them. The sky above was still dark thunder, rolling distant now, softer but steady. Water soaked their jackets, dripped from their hair, filled the grooves in the earth. Harrelson leaned against a tree, catching his breath. Raoul shook out his arms, rolling his shoulders. Tessa crouched to check the dog's paw. Blood still streaked it, but he ignored the pain eyes fixed on the next stretch of woods. "You should rest," she whispered, stroking his damp fur. The shepherd huffed through his nose, pressed his forehead against her knee for one brief moment, then pulled away. Raoul watched, chewing another seed. "He's got more fight than any of us." "Yeah," Harrelson muttered. "And maybe more sense, too." For the first time, he didn't sound sarcastic. The dog moved again, nose to the ground, tail low but firm. The clearing faded behind them as they vanished back into the trees. The deeper they went, the tighter the air seemed to press. The mist thickened, clinging to their skin, making the flashlight beam glow like a ghost. The smell of wet earth grew sharper, mixed with something faint metallic. Tessa's pulse quickened. She glanced at Raoul, who had stopped chewing seeds. His eyes narrowed, scanning. The dog slowed, sniffed the air, growled once. Not loud, not a threat, an alarm. Every muscle in Tessa's body tensed. Somewhere ahead, the forest waited with its secrets. And they followed 3 deputies and a wounded shepherd, each step pulling them further from safety and closer to whatever truth lay hidden in the storm. The rain softened as the hours dragged on, but the forest stayed heavy, soaked through with water and silence. Mist curled low, weaving between trunks and roots, dimming even the beam of Tessa's flashlight. Every step sank into soft earth, every breath drew in the sharp scent of pine and wet moss. The German shepherd pressed on. His body carried exhaustion, but his purpose never faltered. He stopped often now, nose brushing along bark or soil ears flicking as if each sound mattered. Every few steps he looked back, golden eyes catching the weak light, making sure they were still behind him. Tessa followed close. Raoul walked a few paces back, shoulders hunched, the steady crunch of his boots mixing with the drip of rain. Harrelson lagged further, muttering every so often, though softer now, his doubt tempered by the trail of proof building before them. Then Shadow stopped. He froze near a cedar, stiff and alert, nose pressed toward a low branch. Tessa's heart leapt. She moved closer, beam trembling in her grip. There it was. A scrap of fabric. Blue nylon, torn and frayed, clinging like a flag of desperation. The colors shone against the dark green needles, unmistakable. She reached up, fingers shaking as she plucked it free. Her chest tightened. She knew this shade. Eli's jacket. His mother had held up the picture at the press conference, her hands trembling, her eyes swollen from crying. He wore it yesterday, she had said. Bright blue, you can't miss it. And here it was. Raoul leaned closer, studying the fabric in her hand. His voice was low, measured. Looks like the kid passed through, maybe snagged it while running. Tessa nodded, throat dry. She tucked the scrap into her pocket, feeling its weight against the shoelace already there. Proof upon proof. The boy had been here. The dog huffed once, then moved again. His pace grew sharper, more urgent. He sniffed the ground, tail, stiff ears pricked. They followed. The trail dipped into a narrow gully, the ground slick with mud and scattered stones. Water trickled down the sides, forming shallow rivulets that glistened in the faint light. Shadow sniffed hard near a moss-covered rock, then barked once, sharp and certain. Tessa crouched beside him. Her light swept across the ground and froze on a small indentation in the mud. Her breath caught. A footprint. Small. Bare. The toes were splayed wide, pressed deep as if whoever left it had been running. "Oh God," she whispered. "It's his." Raoul knelt beside her, eyes narrowing. Barefoot. That's bad. If the kid lost his shoes, he won't get far without getting hurt. He touched the edge of the print, careful not to ruin it. Fresh, too. Rain hasn't washed it out yet. Tessa's chest ached. She pictured Eli running, shoes torn away in the mud, stumbling barefoot through branches and rocks, fear pressing every step. The thought burned in her mind. The dog growled low, drawing their attention. He had circled the gully nose, pressed near a fallen log. His body was tense, ears, flat tail, rigid. Tessa pushed through ferns, her hands brushing wet leaves aside. On the other side of the log, half buried in mud, lay something small and plastic. She pulled it free. A keychain, heart-shaped with a strange emblem etched into its center. A sunburst wrapped in 2 rings. Mud clung to its edges, but the design was clear. Her brow furrowed. "What is this?" Raoul took it, turning it over in his palm. His face hardened. Clear Path Foundation. They ran a camp west of here 2 summers ago. Shut down after complaints, emotional abuse, shady leadership. Thought they disappeared. Tessa stared at him. Why would Eli have this? Raoul didn't answer. The question hung heavy between them. The dog whined, pacing tight circles. He sniffed the ground, then darted toward a patch of ferns. His nose pressed low, tail stiff. Tessa hurried after him, pushing the brush aside, and froze. A smear of blood streaked the soil. Thin, faint, but real. A few feet away, drag marks cut through the mud, leading up a slope. Her stomach twisted. "He's hurt," she whispered. He tried to keep moving. Raoul's jaw tightened. Or someone carried him. The words hit like a stone. They climbed the slope. The ground grew steeper, the rocks slick under their boots. Raoul reached out once to steady Tessa when she slipped, her palms scraping against stone. She barely felt the sting. Her mind was locked on the image of Eli bleeding, stumbling, maybe fighting to escape. Her chest heaved with every breath, but deep inside something stirred. That fire again. Instinct. The sense she hadn't trusted in over a year. In Seattle, she had silenced it. She had told herself the rules mattered more. That procedure was enough. And a girl had died. But here, with each clue they found, fabric, shoelace footprints, blood, her instincts screamed louder than doubt. The boy was alive. He was close. And the dog knew. She let that truth fill her, steady her. When they reached the top of the slope, Shadow was waiting, his chest heaving, mud streaking his legs. He sniffed at the ground again, then trotted forward. Tessa followed without hesitation. The path wound through denser trees. Branches knotted overhead, blocking the weak stormlight, plunging them into near darkness. The air turned colder, thick with damp earth and cedar. Every few steps brought new signs. A dented flashlight, dead batteries rattling inside. A torn sock, tiny, wet and heavy, in Tessa's hand. Each item hit like a blow. Each one told a story of a child trying, failing, struggling to survive. Raoul's voice grew grimmer with each find. He's leaving a trail without meaning to, falling apart piece by piece. Tessa held the sock, her throat tight. He's still fighting. The dog barked once, as if agreeing. They reached a fork in the trail. Two paths split, one left, one right, both choked with undergrowth. The dog stopped in the middle, sniffing hard, his head jerking between the two. He growled low, uncertain. Raoul scanned the ground with his flashlight. Nothing obvious. Tessa's eyes caught on a mark, just a scuff on bark rough fresh. She stepped closer, ran her hand along it. Something had scraped fast hard. This way, she said, pointing right. Raoul arched a brow. You sure? Her voice was steady. Yes. The dog turned immediately down the right path, confirming her choice. Raoul let out a soft whistle. Guess instinct runs in the family. Tessa ignored the sting of the words. For once, instinct didn't feel like a curse. The deeper they went, the quieter the forest grew. No birds, no wind. Just breath boots and the shepherd's paws pressing into wet soil. The air felt colder now, every sound sharper. Mist clung to their skin, thick and damp, and the trees leaned closer, as if they wanted to keep the secrets hidden. Tessa's pulse quickened. The boy was close. She could feel it, not from the scraps they'd gathered, but from the unshakable pull inside her. The same pull that had once betrayed her, but tonight it guided her. Shadow slowed, nose brushing the ground. His tail stiffened. He barked once, sharp, echoing through the trees. Tessa's flashlight beam swung forward. Her heart stopped. At the base of a ravine, half buried under pine needles and mud, lay a small figure. She gasped, the sound torn from her chest. Eli. Her voice cracked on the name. Raoul's head snapped forward. The boy's body lay twisted, one arm pinned awkwardly beneath him. Jeans torn, dirt streaked across his face. For a second, he looked too still, too pale. Shadow bounded down the slope without hesitation, mud flying under his paws. He pressed himself close to the boy, curling around him, nudging his face with his nose. A low whine escaped his throat, steady, insistent, alive. Tessa stumbled forward, boots sliding, heart racing. The search wasn't over. But the boy was here. An instinct had brought them to him. The ravine was steep, slick with mud and stone. Tessa slid halfway down before she found footing, her boots scraping against the wet slope. Her knees hit hard, but she didn't feel the pain. All she saw was the small body, lying crumpled at the bottom. Eli, she whispered again, her voice breaking. She reached him in seconds. His skin was pale, his face streaked with dirt, freckles buried under mud. A cut stretched across his temple, dried blood flaking along his cheek. His jeans were ripped at the knees, his arms scratched raw. For one endless moment, Tessa feared she was too late. Then she pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse, faint, thin. But there. Relief crashed over her like a wave. Her breath shuddered out, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "You're okay. You're safe now." The boy didn't stir. His chest rose shallow, each breath weak. His shoes were gone, his feet cut and caked with mud. He looked so small against the cold stone, like the forest itself had tried to swallow him whole. Beside him, Shadow pressed close, curling his body against Eli's side. The big shepherd's head rested on the boy's chest, listening, guarding. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes hard and alert. Raoul slid down behind Tessa, landing with a grunt. "Alive." "Yes," she said, her hand trembling on Eli's forehead. "Barely." Raoul exhaled the sound, sharp, shaky. He pulled out his radio, but static hissed back at him. "Signal's dead down here. I'll climb back up, try to raise medics." "Go," Tessa said quickly. Raoul nodded once and started back up the slope, his boots slipping on the wet earth. Tessa turned back to Eli. She brushed damp hair from his forehead, wiping mud away with her sleeve. Her chest ached as she looked at him, 10 years old and already scarred by something darker than most adults ever faced. "You fought hard," she whispered. "You made it this far." Shadow whined, pressing his nose against Eli's shoulder. His tail thumped once, soft and steady, as if encouraging the boy to keep breathing. Tessa's eyes caught on something beside Eli. A torn backpack half buried under branches and dirt, its straps frayed. She pulled it free carefully, shaking off leaves. Inside she found scraps of survival. A smashed granola bar wrapper, a child's flashlight batteries dead, and then a sheet of lined paper, crumpled, soaked, but still legible. The pencil marks had smudged, but the words were clear enough. Her breath slowed as she read. "His name's Mr. Baudin. He said he knew my mom. I saw him at the learning house last week. I didn't like how he looked at the others. Please tell someone if I don't come back." Tessa stared at the words, her chest heavy. This wasn't just a boy lost in the woods. This wasn't an accident. Eli had known he was in danger. He had written this note as a warning, a message to whoever might find it. "Mr. Dean," she murmured. The name tasted wrong, sharp and heavy in her mouth. Shadow lifted his head, ears flicking at the sound of her voice. She read the note again, slower, each word cutting deeper. The learning house. She knew that place, a tutoring center on Main Street. Small, clean, always praised for helping underprivileged kids. She had walked past it dozens of times since moving here. Bright posters in the window, smiling volunteers, a place the town trusted. Her stomach turned. If Eli had seen something there, if someone from that place had lured him, then this wasn't just one man in the woods. This was bigger. Raoul's voice called faint from above. "Got a signal. Med evac, inbound 12 minutes. Tessa didn't look up. She held the note tighter, her eyes scanning every line. This wasn't random, this wasn't chaos. It was a network, organized, hidden, and it had already reached too close to home. Eli stirred faintly. His lips parted, a breath rasping out. His fingers twitched against the dirt. Tessa leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Eli, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, but they didn't open. His voice came in a dry whisper, barely a sound. "Truck," he breathed. Tessa froze. "What truck?" His chest rose shallow. His words faded, broken. "Black, no plate." And then he slipped back into silence, his head rolling weakly to the side. Tessa felt the weight of his words sink deep. A black truck. No license plate. This wasn't a hunter's accident or a child lost. Someone had taken him. Someone with a plan. Shadow pressed his nose against the boy's cheek, whining softly. He licked at Eli's skin, gentle, as if to draw him back. Tessa stroked the dog's wet fur. "You found him," she whispered. "You brought us here." The shepherd stayed pressed close, steady as stone. Minutes later, Raoul returned with news. "Helicopters en route. They'll land north clearing. We need to get him ready to move." Tessa nodded, though her mind was still locked on the note. She slipped it back into the backpack, careful to keep it safe. Evidence? Proof. Raoul crouched beside her, lifting Eli's arm gently. The boy groaned, eyes still shut. He's dehydrated, hypothermic, but he's hanging on. Shadow growled low when Raoul shifted Eli too fast. Raoul froze, then glanced at the dog. All right. Easy. I'm not hurting him." Tessa placed a hand on Shadow's back. "It's okay. He's helping." The shepherd huffed through his nose, but relaxed slightly. His body still tense as he watched Raoul's every move. They worked carefully, wrapping Eli in Raoul's spare jacket, tucking the torn backpack beside him. The storm roared above, but down here time felt still, every second stretching long. When the rescue team arrived, light flooded the ravine from above. A rope dropped, voices shouted, boots scrambled. Paramedics descended, their faces sharp with focus, their hands steady as they checked Eli. "He's hypothermic but stable," one woman said, adjusting an IV. "We'll get him warm. Fluids, oxygen. He'll make it." Shadow growled when they tried to lift the boy too quickly. The paramedic paused, her eyes meeting Tessa's. "It's okay," Tessa said gently, stroking Shadow's head. "He's safe. They're helping." The shepherd whined, but after a long moment, he let them move Eli. As the boy was hoisted up, Shadow followed every inch, his eyes locked on the stretcher, until it vanished into the stormlight above. Only then did he turn back, pressing his wet nose against Tessa's hand. She knelt, whispering, "We'll protect him. I promise." Back at the hospital, the night bled into morning. The storm still raged outside, but inside the bright halls, everything felt washed in harsh white light and the smell of antiseptic. Through the glass window, Tessa watched Eli's sleep tubes and wires at his side. He looked even smaller now, swallowed by blankets and machines. Shadow lay curled at the foot of his bed, head resting on his paws, eyes twitching at every sound. Tessa hadn't left. She couldn't. The note burned in her mind. Mr. Dean, the learning house. It was a crack in the surface, a glimpse of something darker than one missing boy. A network, a plan, a trap. And if Eli hadn't written those words, they would never have known. Tessa leaned against the wall, her eyes never leaving the boy. The guilt of Seattle pressed at her chest, heavy and sharp. But this time, she had listened to instinct. This time, the child was alive. Her hand slid into her pocket. The fabric scrap, the shoelace, the sock, the note. Each piece weighed more than evidence. They were proof of survival, proof of a fight, proof that instinct had been right. She whispered almost to herself, "We're not done, not yet." Shadow lifted his head, his golden eyes catching the sterile light. He huffed once low as if he understood. And in that quiet moment, Tessa knew this was only the beginning. The hospital smelled of bleach and rain-soaked coats. Outside, the storm still rattled windows, but inside, the halls buzzed with low voices and the steady beep of machines. Bright lights washed every corner, too sharp, too white, leaving no room for shadows. They wheeled Eli straight into the emergency wing. Nurses swarmed him, voices clipped and fast hands moving over his thin body. IVs, warm blankets, oxygen mask. His pulse was weak but steady, his chest rising in shallow rhythm. Tessa stood frozen near the doorway, soaked jacket clinging to her boots, leaving mud on the tile. Raoul leaned against the wall beside her, arms folded, jaw tight. Harrelson was somewhere down the hall, arguing with the sheriff over radio reports. But Shadow didn't move from Eli's side. The shepherd followed the stretcher through the swinging doors, his wet paws slipping on the floor. A nurse tried to push him back, but he growled low, a rumble that froze her in place. "Let him stay," Tessa said quickly. "He won't get in the way." The staff glanced at each other, then back at the dog, and for reasons they couldn't explain, they let him remain. Hours blurred. Eli lay hooked to machines, his chest rising under a mound of blankets. His face had lost some of its pallor color, slowly returning, but he barely stirred. A nurse whispered it was exhaustion, shock dehydration. His small body had been pushed too far. He needed time to fight his way back. Tessa sat by the bed, her elbows on her knees, eyes never leaving him. Every faint shift in his breathing made her lean closer. Every beep of the monitor tightened her chest. She wanted to protect him, to guard him against a world that had already stolen too much. Shadow lay curled at the foot of the bed. He didn't sleep. His ears twitched at every sound in the hall, his golden eyes sharp. When Eli shifted in the sheets, Shadow lifted his head, pressing his nose against the boy's arm, then lowered it again. He looked less like a dog than a sentry. It was just past dawn when Nurse Nina Patel walked in. She was small, mid-30s, with dark hair tied in a loose bun and tired eyes that carried warmth even behind exhaustion. She checked Eli's IV, adjusted the blanket, then smiled faintly at Tessa. "You're the one who found him?" she asked softly. Tessa shook her head. "He found us." She nodded toward the shepherd. Nina's eyes softened. "Then you're the hero?" she whispered, kneeling slightly to scratch Shadow's head. The dog tolerated it for a moment, then returned his gaze to Eli, uninterested in praise. Nina stood again, her hands still busy with equipment. "He's stable for now, but it'll be a long recovery. He's malnourished, bruised, and the cuts on his feet will need weeks to heal." Tessa nodded, her throat tight. "But he'll make it, yes." Nina's voice carried certainty. "He's strong, stronger than most kids his age." When Nina left, she placed a folded stack of pamphlets on the counter. Community resources, trauma counseling, support programs. Tessa glanced at them without much thought at first, but one stood out. Bright colors, smiling faces, the words in bold across the top, Harmony Outreach. Building safer families, stronger children. Tessa's chest froze. She picked it up slowly, her eyes scanning the pages. Inside were pictures of volunteers, children at play, cheerful slogans about mentoring and education. And at the bottom, the address, the Learning House. Her hand tightened around the paper. The name from Eli's note. The place he had warned about. She flipped the pamphlet again, her pulse quickening. Harmony Outreach. She remembered seeing volunteers on Main Street handing out flyers, collecting donations. Everyone praised them. A clean face, a helping hand. But Eli had written it down as a warning. Her stomach twisted. Raoul returned just as she folded the flyer shut. His coat was still wet from the storm, his hair plastered to his forehead. He leaned on the door frame, watching her. "You look like you saw a ghost." Tessa held up the pamphlet. Harmony Outreach. They're tied to the Learning House. Raoul frowned, stepping closer. He took the flyer, scanning it with sharp eyes. "I know this logo. We shut down a group like this in Boise. Claimed to help kids, but it was a front. Donations were clean, but the leadership? Not so much." Tessa's chest tightened further. Eli named them in his note. He said a man, Mr. Dean, was there. Watching the children? Raoul cursed under his breath. He tossed the pamphlet onto the counter like it was something foul. "So it's not just a kidnapping. It's organized." Tessa nodded slowly, her eyes drifting back to the boy in the bed. He stumbled onto something they didn't want him to see. Shadow growled low as if agreeing. Hours later, Eli stirred for the first time. His eyelids fluttered, his lips moving faintly under the oxygen mask. Tessa leaned close, her heart racing. "Eli," she whispered. "It's me, Officer Boyd. You're safe." His eyes opened a crack. They were dull-heavy with exhaustion, but they found her face. He swallowed weakly, then whispered through dry lips, "The man." "Mr. Dean?" Her throat tightened. "We know. You don't have to say more now. Rest." He shook his head faintly, eyes wet. "Don't trust them. Don't trust Harmony." Tessa nodded firmly, her voice breaking. "I won't. I promise." His eyelids closed again, and his breathing steadied into shallow rhythm. Shadow pressed closer against the bed, his tail brushing once against the sheets. By evening, the storm had passed, leaving the hospital quiet under gray skies. Raoul sat in the hall making calls, piecing together names, cross-checking Harmony outreach with police databases. Harrelson had gone home for a few hours of sleep, though he promised he'd be back. Tessa stayed by Eli's side, the flyer still in her pocket, its edges damp from her grip. The boy had survived the woods. Shadow had brought them here. But the real danger was larger, deeper hidden behind smiling faces and bright posters. She looked at the shepherd who lifted his head and met her eyes. "You knew," she whispered. "That's why you came to us." The dog huffed once, then laid his head back on his paws. That night, as the machines hummed and Eli slept, Tessa closed her eyes for the first time in days. But even in that brief rest, her mind replayed the same truth. This was no random abduction. It was a warning. And Harmony Outreach was at the heart of it. The storm had passed by the next morning, leaving the streets of Cedar Hollow slick with rain and the sky heavy with low gray clouds. Puddles glistened in the cracks of Main Street. The air smelled like wet asphalt and pine. Tessa parked across from the building with the bright blue banner stretched across its windows, Harmony Outreach. Building safer families, stronger children. It looked ordinary. Too ordinary. White walls, trimmed hedges, a painted sign with smiling children holding books. She had walked past it a dozen times before, never giving it more than a glance. But now, with Eli's crumpled note burned into her memory, the place looked different. Clean paint couldn't cover rot. Shadow sat in the passenger seat beside her. His golden eyes were locked on the building, ears twitching as if he already felt something off. His bandaged paw shifted restlessly against the seat. Tessa rubbed her hand across her face, then grabbed the Harmony flyer from her pocket. She read the words again, Mentorship Outreach Family Counseling. The slogans felt sick now, a mask hiding teeth. She took a breath, pushed the door open, and stepped into the damp morning air. Shadow followed, limping slightly, but refusing to be left behind. Inside the front lobby was painted a soft yellow. Posters lined the walls, children laughing, teachers, smiling slogans about hope. A row of plastic chairs sat empty near the door. A coffee pot gurgled in the corner. The whole place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, too sweet, too staged. At the front desk sat a young woman with short blonde hair and nervous hands. She looked up quickly when the door opened. Her name tag read, Claire Riggs. "Good morning," she said, her voice pitched high, forced. "How can I help you?" Tessa offered her badge. "Officer Boyd, Cedar Hollow PD. I'd like to ask a few questions about one of your students." "Eli Morgan." Claire's smile froze thin as glass. "Of course." "Yes, Eli. He was in our after-school program. Terrible thing, him going missing." Her fingers twisted the pen in her hand. "But I heard he was found safe." Tessa nodded. "He's in the hospital now. Stable. That's wonderful." Claire's words sounded rehearsed, her eyes flicking away too fast. Shadow stepped forward, nose twitching, ears angled sharp. His paws clicked on the tile as he circled the lobby, sniffing along the baseboards, the corners, the desk legs. Claire's gaze followed him nervously. Is the dog necessary? Yes, Tessa said. He is? Tessa asked about staff schedules, about who had been on duty the week Eli vanished. Claire answered quickly, too quickly, her eyes dropping to her papers, her fingers still turning the pen. She mentioned Nathan Hale, the program director, in a tone that tried too hard to sound casual. He oversees everything, Claire said. Big heart. He's the reason Harmony exists. But the way she said it, stiff-clipped, made it sound less like admiration and more like obligation. Tessa pressed. And Mr. Dean, does he work here? Claire froze. Just for a breath. But it was enough. Her smile came back shaky this time. We have lots of volunteers. I don't know all their names. Shadow growled low near the far wall, his nose pressed against the baseboard, his paw scratching faintly at the trim. Tessa's eyes narrowed. She walked toward him, crouched low, running her hand along the wall. The paint looked smooth, but the dog's insistence pulled her closer. She tapped the wood. Hollow. She glanced back at Claire. The receptionist's face had gone pale. What's behind this wall? Tessa asked. Storage, Claire said quickly. Too quickly. Just cleaning supplies. Shadow barked once, sharp and hard. He pawed again, claws scraping the trim, then sat back, eyes locked on Tessa. Tessa stood, her voice firm. Open it. Claire swallowed. I don't have the key. Raoul had taught her once, people who said I don't have the key usually meant I don't want to open the door. Tessa leaned closer, her eyes steady. Then get someone who does. Minutes later, Nathan Hale himself arrived. He was tall, well-dressed, his suit pressed, his dark hair slicked back. His smile was smooth, his voice warm, but his eyes cold, assessing like a man who measured everyone for weakness. Officer Boyd, he said, extending his hand. A pleasure. I hear you found the Morgan boy. Wonderful news. His handshake was firm, too firm, the kind of grip meant to show control. Tessa didn't smile. We'd like to see what's behind that wall. Nathan's smile didn't fade, but it froze slightly at the edges. He glanced at Claire, who stared at her desk as if wishing to vanish. Then he looked back at Tessa, his voice smooth as silk. Of course. We have nothing to hide. He produced a key from his pocket. Too fast, as if he had expected this moment. The wall opened on a narrow compartment hidden behind a sliding panel. Inside, neatly arranged on shelves, sat a row of black devices. Cameras, microphones, small transmitters, not cleaning supplies, surveillance. Tessa's pulse quickened. She stepped closer, her flashlight beam cutting across wires and recorders. Each one labeled organized, ready for use. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. She turned on Nathan. You want to explain this? Nathan's smile didn't waver. Outreach requires accountability. Parents like to know their children are safe. We record lessons, monitor activities, standard practice. Her jaw tightened. You don't need hidden compartments for standard practice. He spread his hands as if amused by her suspicion. You'd be surprised how often equipment gets stolen. We keep ours secure. Shadow growled low, stepping closer to Nathan, teeth flashing faintly. The man's eyes flicked down at the dog, then back up, and for the first time, his smile faltered. Tessa held his gaze. And Mr. Dean? Where does he fit in? Nathan tilted his head, still smiling, but his eyes went sharp. I don't know anyone by that name? Liar? The word burned in her mind. When she left the building an hour later, the clouds had darkened again, pressing low over the street. Claire had avoided her eyes as she signed out the visitor's log. Nathan had smiled the whole time, his voice smooth, his tone polite. But the air inside Harmony Outreach had felt wrong. Too polished, too clean. Shadow walked at her side, limping slightly, but his head stayed high, his ears alert. Tessa slipped the pamphlet back into her pocket. She thought of Eli's note. Mr. Dean, Learning House. Don't trust them. The boy had seen something real, something dangerous. And Harmony Outreach wasn't a shelter. It was a mask. She looked at Shadow, who glanced up at her with those burning eyes. "We're not dealing with one man," she whispered. "We're dealing with an entire network." The dog huffed once as if he understood. And as rain began to fall again, Tessa knew Cedar Hollow had just opened its darkest door. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the monitor and the steady hiss of oxygen. Outside, morning light pushed through the blinds, pale and gray. Eli stirred for the first time in hours, his eyelids twitching, his small hands shifting against the blanket. Tessa leaned forward from the chair where she had spent the night. Shadow raised his head from the floor, golden eyes, sharp ears flicking at the sound of Eli's faint groan. "Hey, Tessa," whispered her voice soft. "You're safe. You're in the hospital. You made it." Eli's lips parted. His throat was dry, but the words scraped through. "Water." Tessa poured a cup and held the straw to his lips. He sipped slowly, weak but determined. Shadow pressed closer to the bed, nose brushing the sheets as if to remind Eli he wasn't alone. When the boy finished, he lay back, breathing steadier. His eyes, dull-rimmed red, met Tessa's. They took me," he whispered. Tessa nodded gently. "I know. Can you tell me about them?" She kept her tone calm, steady, giving him space. Eli's gaze drifted upward as if searching for the memory in the ceiling tiles. His small fingers twisted the blanket. "They wore gloves," he said. "Black shiny. They never touched me without them. Not once." Shadow's ears perked. His body stiffened, tail low, a growl rumbling faint in his chest. Eli noticed his eyes widening slightly. He knows. He remembers them too. Tessa scribbled notes in her pad. Gloves, avoiding prints, careful, professional. "What else?" she asked, softly. Eli closed his eyes, his face twisted, remembering. They smelled strange. Not like dirt, not like smoke. It was metal and oranges. Bitter oranges. Tessa blinked. Cologne. He nodded quickly, the motion small but sharp. Every time they came close, I could smell it. Made me sick, like I wanted to throw up. Shadow whined, turning his head toward the boy nose, pressing against Eli's arm. Tessa wrote again. Distinct cologne, metallic plus citrus. Possible brand signature. "And their faces?" she asked carefully. Eli shook his head. "Masks. Black smooth. I never saw their eyes. Only one thing." His hand trembled as he raised it. He traced a shape weakly on the blanket. A triangle. Then a circle around it. "A tattoo," he whispered. "On his wrist. When his glove slipped, I saw it. Triangle inside a circle. Black ink." Tessa felt the chill creep down her spine. She sketched the shape quickly, holding it up for him. "Like this?" Eli nodded. "Yes. That's him. That's the one who hurt me." Shadow growled again, louder this time, his fur rising, as if the memory itself was an enemy in the room. Eli flinched, but then reached out, pressing his small hand into the shepherd's fur. "It's okay," he whispered to the dog. "You kept me safe." The growl faded, replaced with a soft whine. Shadow licked Eli's hand, once slow and gentle. The door opened, and a new figure stepped inside. A tall man in a long coat, dark hair peppered with gray at the temples. His eyes were sharp, cutting the kind that didn't miss details. He carried himself with quiet weight, a presence that filled the room without sound. "Avery Kane," he said, showing his badge. "Detective? State Bureau." Tessa straightened, surprised. "They pulled you in." Kane gave a single nod. saw the incident report, recognized the details. His gaze shifted to Eli, then to the drawing of the symbol on Tessa's notepad. His jaw tightened. "That mark," he said, voice low. "I've seen it before." Eli shrank slightly under the man's stare. Tessa moved closer to the boy protectively. "He's been through enough," she warned. Kane's eyes softened a fraction. He crouched down, his voice steady but gentle. "You're brave, Eli. You gave us something important. You helped us more than you know." The boy blinked slowly, exhaustion heavy in his gaze, but he held on to Shadow's fur like an anchor. Kane straightened, turning back to Tessa. 4 years ago. A case near Spokane. 2 kids gone missing. Both turned up weeks later alive but broken. They described the same cologne, the same gloves, and one of them saw that symbol on a man's wrist. Tessa's chest tightened. Connected. "Undoubtedly," Kane said. "We never closed it. The group vanished before we could dig deeper. We suspected they used nonprofits as cover recruiting through outreach programs. But we didn't have names. Until now." His gaze flicked to the Harmony flyer sitting folded on the counter. His jaw hardened. Harmony Outreach. Nathan Hale. And whoever this Mr. Dean is. Tessa felt the weight of it settle. This wasn't just Cedar Hollow. It wasn't just Eli. It stretched further wider. Eli's breathing slowed. He drifted again, slipping back towards sleep. Tessa tucked the blanket tighter around him, brushing his hair gently. Shadow curled against the bed, his eyes half closed but his body tense as if guarding even in rest. Kane lowered his voice. "He's lucky to be alive. Whoever these men are, they don't usually leave witnesses," Tessa whispered. Then why Eli Kane thought for a moment. Maybe he was meant to be taken further. Maybe the storm, the terrain, something disrupted their plan. Or maybe Shadow intervened before they could finish. His eyes shifted to the shepherd, who lifted his head and stared back with quiet fire. Kane gave a slow nod as if recognizing a soldier on the same battlefield. They stepped into the hall. The hospital was quieter now. Visitors trickling in, nurses changing shifts. The smell of coffee drifted faint from the cafeteria. Tessa leaned against the wall, her notepad in hand. "You think this is a network?" Kane's voice was steady. "I know it. Multiple towns, same tactics, same symbols. They hide behind charities, schools, programs. Clean fronts with dirty insides." He took out his phone, flipping through photos until he found one. He turned the screen to her. The same symbol. A triangle inside a circle burned into the skin of a warehouse door in Spokane. Her chest tightened. The same people. Or the same leaders, Kane said. His gaze was sharp. "We dig now, or we lose them again." Tessa nodded slowly. Her instincts burned hot in her chest, no longer silent. Eli's note, the scent, the gloves, the tattoo, they weren't fragments anymore. They were threads. And threads made a web. When she returned to the room, Eli was asleep again, his face calm under the glow of the monitors. Shadow hadn't moved his head, resting on the boy's leg. Tessa stood there for a long moment, the storm in her chest settling into something sharper. This wasn't over. Not even close. She touched the folded flyer in her pocket. Harmony Outreach wasn't a refuge. It was a front. And men like Nathan Hale and Mr. Dean were its architects. She whispered to Shadow, "We're going after them." The shepherd lifted his head, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He huffed once, quiet but firm. Agreement. And as the boy slept, guarded by his silent sentinel, Tessa knew they had crossed a line. This wasn't just about saving one child. It was about tearing apart the network that hunted them. The call came just after dawn. Raoul's voice over the line was clipped tense. "Tessa, we've got a body. Oak Ridge Motel 20 minutes west. Guy named Paul Henley. Used to work at Harmony Outreach. Tessa sat up from the hospital chair where she had spent the night watching Eli sleep. Shadow stretched on the floor beside her, ears pricking as if he could feel the urgency in Raoul's tone. Henley, she asked. Custodian, 2 years on staff. Quit 6 months ago. He filed a complaint, said they were hiding things. Nobody listened. Now he's dead. Sheriff's calling it suicide. The word hit like a stone. Tessa's stomach nodded. You don't believe that? Neither do you, Raoul said. Meet me there. The Oak Ridge Motel sat at the edge of town, a squat row of rooms, with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed against the morning air. The parking lot was half-empty puddles glimmering in the cracked asphalt. A yellow strip of police tape fluttered across the door to room 6. Raoul was already there, leaning against his unmarked car, chewing sunflower seeds as always. His face was tight, his eyes sharp. Room's inside, he said. Coroner's on the way. But take a look before they shut it down. Shadow padded beside Tessa as they ducked under the tape. The smell hit first. Stale air, sweat, something sharp, and chemical cleaning solution poured too heavy. The blinds were drawn tight, muting the light. The body lay slumped in the bathroom doorway. Paul Henley. Mid-40s, graying hair glasses cracked on the tile. A belt around his neck looped over the shower rod. On the surface, it looked like suicide. Too neat, too staged. Tessa crouched, eyes scanning. The belt was tight, but the angle was wrong. His knees touched the ground. His palms were scraped raw. See that Raoul pointed with a gloved hand. Bruises on the arms, like he was grabbed, dragged. Shadow growled low, circling the body. His nose twitched, sniffing the air. He moved toward the carpet near the bed, then stopped dead. His body stiffened, ears forward, hackles rising. Tessa watched him carefully. What is it, boy? The shepherd lowered his head, sniffing again. Then he let out a sharp bark, deep and certain, before retreating with a whine as if the scent itself repelled him. Raoul frowned. What's he picking up? Tessa's chest tightened. She knew before she even said it. That smell. Bitter orange, metallic. The cologne Eli remembered. Raoul spat a seed into a paper cup, his jaw hardening. So the same men were here. Tessa nodded, her stomach twisting. And they wanted this to look like suicide. She moved around the room slowly, every detail sharp. The bedspread was wrinkled, but not slept in. A chair was tipped near the desk. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the counter, but the seal was fresh, broken only hours ago. Too perfect. Too placed. On the table by the bed lay an envelope. No address, just a single sheet inside. Scrawled handwriting, shaky. I can't live with the guilt. I was part of it. Forgive me. Tessa stared at it. The words were generic, rushed without detail. She had seen real suicide notes. They carried weight names, apologies. This one looked like it had been written for show. Raoul leaned over her shoulder. Planted, he muttered. Shadow barked once, as if agreeing, his nose pressed to the chair leg. Tessa moved to the carpet again, crouching where Shadow had stopped. A faint smear darkened the fibers, mud streaked as if from a dragged shoe. She followed it with her light across the floor toward the bathroom. Her pulse quickened. Henley hadn't walked to that shower rod. He had been dragged. She rose, her jaw set. This wasn't suicide. This was cleanup. Raoul nodded grimly. They tied up a loose end. Outside, the coroner's van pulled up, lights flashing faint against the gray sky. 2 deputies moved to secure the scene, but Raoul pulled Tessa aside before they could be cut off. Henley filed a complaint 6 months ago, Raoul said. Said Harmony Outreach was keeping records on kids that didn't make sense. Schedules, habits, medical info. He sent it to the state, but it got buried. Buried how, Tessa asked. Couldn't prove it. Files disappeared. And now, so did he. Tessa looked back at the motel room, at the yellow tape fluttering. Her chest felt heavy, but her instincts screamed louder. This was no isolated death. It was a message. Later at the station, the official report came down suicide. Case closed. Tessa slammed the file shut on her desk. It's a lie. Raoul leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Sheriff doesn't want to fight it. Too messy. Easier to call it a drunk with regrets. Shadow growled from under the desk head, resting on his paws, but eyes burning. Tessa rubbed her forehead. Eli's note, the cologne, the tattoo. Now, Henley. They're erasing anyone who knows too much. Raoul spat another seed shell into the trash. Then we dig deeper. Quietly. If they're willing to stage a murder in our backyard, they're not afraid of us. Yet. That night, Tessa couldn't sleep. She sat in her car outside the hospital, staring at the reflection of neon signs in the rain. The Harmony Outreach flyer sat on the passenger seat, creased from her hands. Shadow rested beside her, his head heavy against her lap, eyes half closed but body still tense. She whispered into the dark. They killed him because he tried to tell the truth. If we're not careful, we'll be next. The shepherd's ears flicked, and he pressed his nose against her arm, warm and steady. Tessa stared at the flyer again. Nathan Hale's face in the brochures, smiling trustworthy. And somewhere behind that smile, Mr. Dean. She closed her eyes, the words forming like stone in her chest. We're not letting them bury this again. Shadow huffed once, soft but certain. The next morning, Detective Avery Kane met them in the briefing room. His coat was damp, his expression grim. He placed a file on the table and slid it toward them. Henley's death isn't the first, he said. Tessa opened the file. Photos, reports, other suicides, other employees from outreach programs across the state. Same pattern. Complaints, disappearances, deaths, staged too neatly. Kane tapped the photo of the tattoo symbol. The same group, the same network. And now, they're here. Tessa's pulse quickened. Oak Ridge wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Kane nodded once. We're on borrowed time. Raoul spat a seed into his cup, his eyes narrowing. Then we start digging before they wipe out the next witness. Shadow growled low, his gaze locked on the flyer still lying on the table. Tessa leaned forward, her voice steady. Harmony Outreach is a front. Nathan Hale knows, and Mr. Dean's pulling strings. Kane's eyes were sharp, his tone firm. Then we tear down the mask. But we move carefully. One wrong step, and we vanish like Henley. As the room fell into silence, the storm outside began again. Rain tapping against the windows. Tessa looked down at her notes. Gloves, cologne tattoo, staged deaths. The pattern was no longer hidden. Shadow pressed his head against her leg, steady as stone. She whispered, almost to herself, We're not chasing shadows anymore. We're hunting them. The rain did not let up. It hammered the windshield of Raoul's car as he steered along the winding forest road. Wipers slapped back and forth in a frantic rhythm, never quite clearing the downpour. Branches swayed under the storm, throwing shadows across the headlights. In the back seat, Shadow sat, rigid eyes fixed on the blurred trees outside. His ears twitched at every shift in sound. Next to him, Eli dozed fitfully, still pale, wrapped in a blanket. Nurse Patel had promised to watch him at the hospital, but Eli had begged Tessa not to leave him. She had relented, though her nerves screamed that it was a risk. Now the boy stirred in his sleep. Warehouse. Voices, he muttered. Tessa leaned over, brushing damp hair from his forehead. We're close, she whispered. The clue had come from Henley's cheap flip phone. Raoul had pulled the call log before the sheriff's office sealed the case. One number repeated always at night. an unlisted line bouncing through towers near the old industrial road north of Cedar Hollow. It led here, to the woods, to a warehouse no one had used in 20 years. They stopped at the edge of a clearing. The building rose out of the rain, like a beast crouched in the dark, rusted steel walls, a sagging roofline, shattered windows patched with plywood. A place forgotten, except by those who wanted it that way. Floodlights glared at the entrance, washing the mud in sickly yellow. A single black SUV sat parked under the glow. Raoul killed the engine. Looks alive. Tessa's throat tightened. She checked her sidearm, slid a fresh magazine in place. The storm roared overhead, but inside her chest it was quieter, like a drum beat before the plunge. A new set of headlights cut through the storm behind them. A black government sedan rolled to a stop. From it stepped Colton Reyes. He was tall, shoulders squared, his dark suit hidden under a rain jacket. His hair was cropped close, his jaw unshaven. He moved with the kind of calm that only came from long years chasing shadows. Tessa knew him by reputation. Federal task force organized crime networks that vanished victims as if they were smoke. He walked up with a nod, eyes sharp, reading the group in a second. "Boys safe?" he asked, glancing at Eli. "For now," Tessa said. Reyes studied Shadow, the dog, holding his stare without blinking. Then he looked at Raoul. "Intel." Raoul spat a seed shell into the mud. "Warehouse has power. SUV out front. No movement outside, but they're in there. Phones and files trace back to this spot. Could be storage. Could be a hub." Reyes nodded once, already calculating. "Then we hit it clean. Fast and quiet." The rain thickened, drumming against the hoods of their jackets. Reyes unrolled a damp map on the hood of his car, flashlight beams cut across it. "2 doors," Reyes said. "Main entrance here under the lights. Service door at the back faces the tree line. Windows are covered but busted enough to use. We go 2 teams." Raoul grunted. "That's 4 of us counting the dog. Not much of a team." Reyes's eyes were cold. "Better than going in blind." "You," he pointed at Raoul. "Take the rear with the shepherd. He's your nose. If anyone bolts, he'll know first." Raoul looked at Shadow and sighed. "Hope he listens better than my ex-wife." Shadow huffed, unimpressed. Reyes turned to Tessa. "You're with me front. Keep your weapon steady. They hear us coming, they'll torch whatever's inside. We can't let that happen." Tessa nodded, jaw tight. "Understood." Eli stirred in the back seat. "They'll know you're coming," he whispered. His voice was small, but his eyes were wide open now. "They always know." Tessa bent to meet his gaze. "We'll be careful. Stay here. Lock the doors." The boy's hand clutched hers with surprising strength. "Don't let them take me back." Her throat closed, but she forced a smile. Not a chance. The rain grew heavier, sheets of water sliding down their jackets as they moved into position. Mud sucked at their boots. The warehouse loomed larger, a black wall against the storm. Every sense screamed at Tessa. The roar of rain, the slap of branches, the thrum of her own heartbeat. Beside her, Reyes moved with steady precision. Pistol raised, low flashlight clipped under his grip. At the rear, Raoul and Shadow melted into the trees. Shadow's body was a tense line nose, working the wet air. They crouched near the floodlit door. The SUV's windows were dark, no shapes inside. Tessa could feel the hum of the generator powering the lights. Reyes leaned close, his voice low but steady. "When I give the signal, we breach. Keep your aim center mass. Don't hesitate." Tessa swallowed hard. She wasn't new to weapons. She wasn't new to danger. But this felt different. This felt like a step into something that reached beyond their small town, into a network coiled in the shadows. Her fingers tightened on the grip of her pistol. In the woods, Raoul's voice crackled faint over the comm. Back door locked. Bars welded. They weren't expecting friends. Reyes clicked his mic once signal received. Hold position. Watch for movement. Then he counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1. His boot slammed the door. The lock gave way with a crack of splintering wood. They were inside. The warehouse swallowed them whole. Dark, cavernous, the air thick with dust and oil. Rows of metal shelving rose into the gloom, stacked with crates and bins. A faint hum of machinery somewhere deeper. Reyes's flashlight swept the room, cutting through the dark. Shadows leapt and shrank across the walls. Clear left, Tessa whispered, moving tight at his side. The storm outside became a muffled roar against the steel walls. Inside, every creak of the floor, every drip of water echoed like a gunshot. Then Shadow barked, sharp, urgent over the comm. Raoul's voice followed, tense. Movement. South side. They're here. Reyes's eyes narrowed. He raised his pistol, scanning the aisles. Stay sharp. This place isn't empty. They moved deeper, each step a test of silence. Tessa's pulse thudded in her ears. She could smell it now, the faint trace of something bitter metallic cutting through the damp air. Cologne. The same one Eli had described. Her stomach turned cold. Reyes, she breathed. They're here. He gave a single nod, jaw-tight eyes fixed on the dark. And then a door slammed somewhere in the distance. The hunt had begun. The warehouse erupted with sound. One moment the aisles were hushed, tense with nothing but rain pounding on tin. The next, a roar split the dark, a generator coughing awake lights flooding the space in harsh white beams. Shadows sprang up everywhere, jagged and violent. Reyes lifted his weapon instantly. Contact, he barked. Figures darted between shelves. Boots clanged on steel. The smell of oil, sweat, and cologne mixed thick in the air. Tessa's pulse spiked. She pressed against a crate pistol, steady scanning for targets. A flash of movement, 2 men sprinting across the aisle with rifles. Reyes fired. One dropped. The other vanished behind a wall of boxes. Raoul back entrance pressure, Reyes snapped into his mic. 2 men headed my way. Raoul answered, breath sharp. Shadow's already on him. Then came a sound like thunder. Shadow's bark low and furious, echoing through the steel cavern. Tessa surged forward with Reyes covering corners, every breath ragged. They advanced through the rows of crates, flashlights dancing. And then there. A man sprinted out from behind a column face, hidden by a hood. His left arm swung as he ran, sleeve riding up. A tattoo caught the beam triangle inside a circle, black lines burned into skin. The mark, Tessa shouted. The man bolted down a side passage, vanishing into the maze. Before anyone else could move, Shadow tore free from Raoul's side and gave chase. His claws scraped on concrete as he lunged after the hooded man, a streak of muscle and fury in the half-light. Shadow, Tessa called, but he was gone. The chase thundered through the warehouse. Shadow's growls echoed, joined by the desperate clang of boots. The tattooed man fired a shot over his shoulder. Metal sparked, ricocheting off a beam. But the shepherd didn't falter. He closed the distance, a predator locked on prey. Tessa moved to follow, but Reyes grabbed her arm. Stay on task. The dog can run faster than you. She hated it, but he was right. She forced herself to breathe, to listen. That's when she heard it. A sound so faint, it barely existed beneath the storm and gunfire. A cry. Not of a man, not of a fighter, a child. Tessa froze. The cry came again, muffled, desperate somewhere inside the walls. Reyes, she whispered, eyes wide. Do you hear that? He stilled, then nodded once. North wall. Move. They ran, boots pounding, flashlights slicing through dust. Raoul appeared from the rear, weapon drawn, face pale. What the hell was that? Tessa pointed. Kids. In there. The three of them reached a section of corrugated wall half hidden by stacked pallets. Tessa pressed her ear to the metal. A chorus of whimpers trembled through. Her stomach clenched. They're inside. Reyes didn't hesitate. He shoved pallets aside, muscles straining. Raúl joined, grunting with effort, until the wall was clear. Behind it, a sheet of metal bolted in place newer than the rest of the warehouse. A false wall. Raúl swore. They built cages. Tessa's chest tightened with rage. She raised her weapon, but Reyes held up a hand. "Cover us! I'll breach!" He wedged a crowbar between the panels and heaved. Metal screamed, bolts tore free. The sheet clattered aside, and the cries spilled out louder, now raw, terrified. Inside the hidden chamber were 4 children. They huddled together on thin mats, their faces pale eyes wide under the harsh beam of flashlights. The air smelled of mildew and fear. The smallest, a girl no older than 5, clutched a ragged stuffed rabbit. Her cheeks were streaked with dirt and tears. She flinched when the light touched her, then buried her face in the toy. Beside her, a boy of 7 sat stiff, his hair cropped close. His hands trembled, but his chin lifted as if trying to be brave. He had a bruise along his jaw, purple and swollen. Another boy, older, maybe 10, rocked back and forth with arms wrapped around himself. His lips moved in a silent mantra, repeating words no one could hear. His socks were torn, his feet red with cold. The last was a girl of 9, tall for her age, her eyes sharp despite her fear. She moved in front of the others, as if to shield them, shoulders tight. When she saw Tessa, she whispered, "Don't hurt us." Tessa's throat closed. No, we're here to help." Raúl lowered his rifle, face hard. Bastards locked them in like animals. Reyes swept the flashlight across the chamber, scanning. No restraints, just fear. "Get them out." Tessa crouched low, lowering her gun so it wouldn't frighten them. She kept her voice soft. "You're safe now. My name's Tessa. We're going to take you home." The older girl didn't move. Her eyes darted between them, mistrust raw in every line of her face. "They said, no one comes. No one cares." Tessa's heart broke. She extended her hand, palm up. "They lied. We're here." For a long moment, the girl didn't move. Then slowly she reached out. Her small hand touched Tessa's, trembling. Behind them, gunfire cracked again, sharp, distant. Shadow's bark split the air, furious. Reyes's jaw tightened. "Our runner's still moving. We can't waste time." Tessa looked back at the children, then at the shadows flickering across the warehouse. Her gut screamed both directions. Reyes said what she already knew. "Choice is clear. Secure the kids first." Tessa nodded, voice hoarse. "We save them." They lifted the children out one by one. The boy with the bruise hissed in pain when Raúl touched him. Raúl crouched low, his gruff tone gentler than Tessa had ever heard. "Easy, champ. I got you. Nobody's laying a hand on you again." The rocking boy resisted, eyes glazed, repeating his mantra. Shadow's bark sounded again in the distance, desperate, urgent. Tessa swallowed, heart-torn. She placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Count with me," she whispered. 1, 2, 3. His lips stilled. Slowly he let her guide him out. The little girl with the rabbit clung to Tessa's jacket. Her voice was a whisper against Tessa's chest. "Is it really over?" Tessa's throat burned. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." As they carried the children toward the exit, Shadow reappeared. He was soaked flanks, heaving a streak of blood across his fur, not his own. His jaws were stained eyes, burning with frustration. He hadn't caught the man with the tattoo, but he had heard the cries first. He had turned back. Tessa met his eyes, gratitude and ache colliding in her chest. "Good boy," she whispered. Shadow pressed close to the children, sniffing them, then positioned himself between them and the dark. Guardian, not hunter. They moved fast, guns still ready, kids in tow. Every creak felt like a threat, every shadow a possible ambush. Reyes led the way, eyes sharp. Raúl guarded the rear, muttering curses under his breath. When they burst through the warehouse doors into the storm, the floodlights blinded them. Rain poured down, washing the grime from the children's faces, plastering their hair. Eli stood by the car, face pale, blanket clutched around him. His eyes widened at the sight of the children. He rushed forward, voice breaking. "You found them." The older girl looked at him, recognition flickering. You were there too." Eli nodded, tears spilling. "We're safe now." For a brief moment, despite the storm and the danger still lurking, the clearing felt different. The children breathed free air again. The rabbit clutched tighter. The boy with the bruise leaned against Raúl's side, trembling but alive. And Tessa felt something stir inside her chest. A flame she thought had died back in Seattle. Her instincts had been right. Her choice, save lives over revenge, had been the right one. The man with the tattoo was still out there. Mr. Dean was still pulling strings. But 4 children were alive, and that mattered more than anything else tonight. Reyes scanned the tree-line weapon still in hand. "We move. Now. This place won't stay quiet." Tessa nodded, ushering the children toward the cars. Shadow lingered at her side eyes, never leaving the storm-dark woods. Somewhere out there, the man with the mark was running free. But the roar in the dark tonight was not his. It was the sound of children crying out and being answered. The night after the warehouse raid was anything but quiet. Convoys of police and federal agents fanned out across Cedar Hollow and the nearby towns. Sirens cut through the storm, blue and red lights chasing shadows down every road. Houses linked to Harmony Outreach were raided. Motels searched. Storage units cracked open. And in the middle of it all, a name surfaced. Victor Greaves. Greaves was not a man who looked dangerous at first glance. When they dragged him out of his gated house at dawn, he was composed, even smug. A tailored shirt under his trench coat, silver hair slicked back, dark eyes steady. The kind of man who had grown used to commanding rooms, not hiding in corners. Tessa watched as he was brought into the interrogation room. She followed him inside, the steel door closing with a heavy click. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the table. "You're younger than I expected," Greaves said, voice calm, almost paternal. "And you're colder than I expected," Tessa replied. A faint smile touched his lips. "Cold keeps things efficient. Children money order. Everything has its place." Tessa's jaw clenched. "You treat people like pieces. Kids like cargo. Cargo can be valuable," Greaves said, leaning back in his chair. "You think this ends with me? No. I'm a middleman at best. The real architects never sit in rooms like this." Tessa leaned forward, eyes locked on his. "Then give me a name." Greaves met her stare, unflinching. "Why would I betray men more dangerous than you'll ever be?" For the first time since she had entered, Tessa felt a shiver crawl up her spine. He wasn't bluffing. Somewhere higher up the chain beyond Greaves, the figure called Mr. Dean still waited. Outside the station, the storm had broken, but tension hung heavier than the rain. Patrol cars lined the street. Families gathered waiting for word of their missing children. Reporters swarmed at barricades. And then came the sound of an engine. A truck, headlights blazing, roared down the road toward the police cordon. Too fast, too deliberate. "Get the kids back," someone shouted. Officers scrambled. Children cried out. The truck barreled forward, unstoppable. And then, shadow moved. He shot from the side, a streak of fur and fury leaping at the driver's side door. His weight hit with a crack. The truck swerved. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. The vehicle smashed into a barricade and flipped onto its side with a crash of shattering glass and twisting metal. Smoke and sparks filled the air. But Shadow lay crumpled in the street. Tessa ran. She dropped beside him, knees hitting pavement, hands shaking as she touched his blood-matted fur. His chest rose shallow but steady. No, you stay with me," she whispered, voice raw. The children huddled behind officers, staring wide-eyed at the shepherd, who had saved them twice now. Raoul's face was pale, fists clenched. Even Reyes's iron composure cracked his voice thick as he ordered medics forward. Shadow's eyes fluttered open. He fixed them on Tessa, steady, unwavering, as if reminding her of the vow he had already made, to protect no matter the cost. Back inside, Victor Greaves waited alone in the interrogation room. He sat perfectly still, hands folded, listening to the chaos outside. When Tessa returned, her jacket streaked with Shadow's blood, her eyes burned like fire. "You think this is efficiency?" she said, voice shaking but strong. "No, this is desperation. And men like you middlemen will fall first." For the first time, Greaves's composure slipped, just slightly. His smile faltered. Outside, sirens wailed, medics shouted, and the thin line between hope and loss grew sharper than ever. The storm passed, and with it the long nights of fear. Cedar Hollow began to breathe again. At the small veterinary clinic near the edge of town, Shadow lay stretched across a padded mat. Bandages wrapped his ribs, his fur trimmed around the wounds. Machines hummed softly, but the real medicine was simpler. The presence of the boy he had saved. Eli Morgan sat at his side, one hand resting gently against Shadow's paw. His sister Rachel leaned close, whispering stories about heroes and secret leagues, as if she were sure Shadow could understand. Day by day, the shepherd's chest grew stronger. The shallow breaths turned steady. His eyes, once dulled by pain, regained their sharp, alert gleam. And when he finally pushed himself to his feet, staggering but proud, the town cheered as if a fallen soldier had risen again. Cedar Hollow rallied around him. The sheriff's office held a small ceremony where children pressed handmade medals against Shadow's collar. Tessa stood in uniform, quiet pride in her eyes, and Deputy Harrelson clapped until his palms stung. Raoul Mercer grinned from the edge of the crowd, muttering that he'd never salute a dog, though the smile betrayed him. But Tessa's vision went further than one celebration. She filed papers to establish a dedicated unit inside the state police, an investigative task force focused on missing children. For her, the scars of Seattle no longer held her back. They became her drive. Cedar Hollow would be the starting point of something larger, a line drawn against predators hiding in plain sight. And Shadow. He refused to retire into comfort. When Eli returned for therapy sessions to untangle nightmares, Shadow padded inside the room with him. No words, no instructions, just presence. The boy's heartbeat slowed whenever the shepherd curled at his feet. Soon other children joined the program. Survivors of silence and fear found a companion who never asked questions, only offered loyalty. Shadow became more than a dog. He was the sentinel of Cedar Hollow, a living legend stitched into the town's new identity. One autumn afternoon, months after the raid, Eli sat by the window of his home, pencils scattered across the desk. His sketchbook lay open, lines bold and sure for a boy his age. The title at the top of the page read, "Captain Shadow and the Four-Legged League." In the first panel, a black and tan shepherd stood atop a burning warehouse cape, snapping like a flag. In the next, children with masks and bright emblems joined him, some small, some strong, all free. Together they faced villains drawn with long shadows and cold eyes. Rachel peeked over his shoulder, giggling. "You made Shadow a superhero." "He already is," Eli said, not looking up, his hand steady as he filled in the final lines. From the yard below, Shadow barked once, low and sure as though he had heard. The sound rolled across the neighborhood, neither warning nor cry, but a vow renewed. Cedar Hollow would remember storms and secrets, but more than that, it would remember the guardian who had walked out of the woods one night carrying a child's backpack and refusing to turn away. And in the stories children drew told and passed down, Shadow's legend would live, an emblem of trust, of battles fought in silence, of hope carried on 4 legs.